The cabin was quiet as the daytime flight cruised smoothly above the clouds. Sunlight streamed through the windows, lighting up the first-class section. Passengers relaxed, believing this would be an ordinary journey. Then it happened. A flight attendant stopped beside Steven Seagal and looked down at him with a cold expression. She held a meal tray in her hands but did not offer it to him. Instead, she shook her head and said the order was not for him. Steven looked up calmly. He had been sitting quietly since boarding. No sunglasses. No bodyguards. No special requests. He politely replied that he was seated in first class and had ordered a meal like everyone else. The attendant barely listened. She scanned him from head to toe and responded loudly enough for others to hear. "This meal is reserved for priority passengers." The words hit the cabin like a sudden drop in turbulence. Nearby passengers slowly turned their heads. Some frowned. Some whispered. Others stared openly. Phones were lowered. Conversations stopped. Steven remained seated. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He simply asked again in a calm, steady tone, "Can you please check my seat number?" The attendant sighed in annoyance. She repeated that the order was not his. Then she walked away, leaving him without a meal. A heavy silence followed. People exchanged looks. A businessman across the aisle shifted uncomfortably. A woman near the window shook her head. Everyone could feel something was wrong. Steven Seagal sat there quietly, hands resting on the armrests, eyes forward, unmoved by the stares, unshaken by the disrespect. To the passengers, he looked like an ordinary traveler. Simple clothes. No visible signs of wealth or status. Just another man being ignored. But what no one realized in that moment was that they were witnessing the calm before a storm. The humiliation was public. The judgment was instant. The disrespect was deliberate. And yet Steven did nothing. No anger. No confrontation. No demand to see a supervisor. He waited. Because sometimes the strongest response is silence. And sometimes the most powerful move is the one no one sees coming. What happened next would stop the cabin cold, change the mood of the entire flight, and leave everyone on board questioning how quickly they judge others. This was not just about a meal. It was about respect. And the lesson that followed would shock everyone on that plane. It was a bright daytime flight traveling from New York to Los Angeles. The sky outside was clear and calm. Sunlight poured through the wide first-class windows, creating a relaxed, peaceful atmosphere. The first-class cabin felt exclusive and comfortable. Businessmen sat in pressed suits sipping hot coffee. Some scrolled through emails on sleek tablets. Others leaned back with noise-canceling headphones, enjoying the quiet luxury of the flight. Soft music played in the background. The smell of fresh meals drifted slowly through the aisle. Flight attendants moved with practiced smiles, offering drinks and warm towels. In the middle of this polished setting sat Steven Seagal. He did not stand out. He wore simple daytime clothes. A plain shirt. Comfortable pants. Nothing flashy. Nothing that announced status. There was no entourage around him. No assistant. No security. No demand for attention. He sat calmly in his seat, looking out the window as the plane glided smoothly above the clouds. To anyone passing by, he appeared like just another passenger enjoying a peaceful flight. When the meal service began, the mood in the cabin shifted slightly. Trays were prepared. Carts rolled forward. Passengers straightened in their seats. One by one meals were placed on folded tables. Polite smiles. Quiet thank yous. The routine was smooth and efficient. Then something subtle but noticeable happened. The flight attendant approached Steven's row. She paused for a brief moment, looked at her list, then moved past him without stopping. Steven noticed but did not react immediately. He waited, assuming it was a simple mistake. The cart continued down the aisle. More meals were served. Laughter and conversation returned. Steven glanced around. Passengers near him were already eating. Their trays were full. His table remained empty. After a few moments, he gently raised his hand. His voice was calm and respectful. "Excuse me, I think my meal was missed." The attendant stopped, turned back slowly. Her expression was firm and unreadable. She looked at Stephen, then glanced at his clothes, then at the seat number again. Her reply was sharp and dismissive. "First-class meals are reserved for priority guests." The words hung in the air. A few nearby passengers looked up from their trays. A man across the aisle paused mid-bite. A woman 2 rows ahead turned her head slightly. Stephen blinked once, surprised but composed. He responded politely, "I am seated in first class." The attendant crossed her arms slightly. Her tone did not soften. "Yes, but not everyone here qualifies." The cabin grew quieter. Stephen did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He did not demand to speak to anyone. He simply nodded and lowered his hand. Inside the first-class cabin where comfort and courtesy were expected, an invisible line had just been drawn. People began to sense the tension. The atmosphere no longer felt relaxed. It felt awkward. Some passengers avoided eye contact. Others watched closely. Steven Seagal sat back in his seat. His posture remained relaxed, his face calm, but something had clearly shifted. This was no longer just about a meal. It was about judgment, about assumptions, about how quickly respect can disappear. And what no one in that cabin knew at that moment was that this quiet setup was about to lead to a moment that would change the entire flight. Backhand index pointing right. Comment below and tell me where you are watching from. The flight attendant returned a few minutes later, pushing the meal cart slowly down the aisle. Plates were stacked neatly. Steam rose from the covered trays. The soft clatter of dishes echoed through the cabin. For a brief second some passengers thought she had come back to correct the mistake. She stopped beside Stephen's row. But instead of turning toward him, she shifted slightly and handed a full tray to the passenger sitting across the aisle. Her movement was deliberate, careful, almost performative. As she placed the tray down, she glanced at Stephen. Not with apology, not with uncertainty, but with quiet dismissal. "You can order something later from economy." The words were calm but sharp, loud enough to be heard, final enough to end the discussion. A ripple moved through the cabin. Forks paused in mid-air. Cups were set down. Several heads turned at once. People nearby noticed immediately. The contrast was impossible to ignore. One first-class passenger eating comfortably, another sitting with an empty table. Whispers spread softly. Quick comments under breath. Confused looks passed between strangers. Did she really say that? That does not seem right. He is sitting in first class too. A man 2 rows back frowned and leaned toward his companion. A woman across the aisle shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Someone near the window quietly pulled out a phone but did not raise it yet. The tension thickened. Steven Seagal did not react. He did not look at the tray. He did not look at the attendant. He did not respond at all. Slowly he leaned back in his seat, folded his hands, and closed his eyes. The message was clear. He was choosing patience over confrontation. The attendant waited for a reaction. A complaint. A protest. Anything. None came. She gave a short nod and continued down the aisle. The cart rolled away. The sound of wheels faded. But the moment stayed. The cabin was no longer comfortable. The quiet luxury felt strained, unnatural. Passengers were now fully aware that something was wrong. This was not a misunderstanding anymore. It was a choice. Stephen remained silent, eyes closed, breathing steady. He did not appear angry. He did not appear embarrassed. He appeared controlled. And that made people even more uncomfortable. Some passengers felt sympathy. Others felt confusion. A few felt guilt for not speaking up. Everyone felt the weight of the moment. The attendant continued serving meals further down, laughing lightly with other passengers, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. But the contrast only made the situation worse. Stephen sat there without food, without acknowledgement, without explanation. Yet he did not move. He did not call her back. He did not press the service button. He waited. Minutes passed. The hum of the engines filled the silence. Silverware clinked. But conversation never fully returned. People stole glances toward Stephen, trying to read his face, trying to understand why he stayed so calm. What they did not know was that this calm was not weakness. It was restraint. And restraint often comes from experience, from knowing that power does not need to announce itself. The conflict had reached its peak, not through shouting, not through drama, but through quiet disrespect. And while the cabin tried to move on, while meals were eaten and trays cleared, Steven Seagal remained still, waiting, because sometimes the moment of response is not immediate. Sometimes it arrives when no one expects it, and when it does, the silence breaks in ways no one can ignore. The silence in the cabin did not last. A passenger a few rows ahead leaned into the aisle and quietly spoke to another crew member. Moments later the head purser appeared. Her posture was upright, her expression professional but alert. She stopped beside Stephen's seat. "Sir, is there a problem?" Stephen opened his eyes slowly and looked up. His voice was calm and steady. "I was told I am not eligible for a meal." The head purser nodded and gestured for the attendant to step forward. The same attendant stood beside her with crossed arms, her expression unreadable. Stephen reached into his jacket and calmly removed his boarding pass. He handed it over without a word. The head purser examined it carefully. Seat confirmed. First class confirmed. Ticket fully paid. There was no confusion, no error, no special condition. Everything was clear. She looked at the attendant. The attendant shrugged slightly, as if the confirmation meant nothing. Still no apology came. Still no acknowledgement of the mistake. The head purser hesitated, glancing between Stephen and the attendant. The attendant tilted her head and smirked. "Rules are rules." The words landed heavily. A quiet gasp came from somewhere in the cabin. Several passengers exchanged shocked looks. The tension immediately rose. What had been uncomfortable was now undeniable. Stephen sat motionless. His face showed no anger, no frustration. But the atmosphere around him tightened. Every eye in first class was now focused on him, on the attendant, on the head purser frozen between policy and pressure. The hum of the engines felt louder. The air felt thicker. People stopped pretending to mind their own business. This was no longer private. A man near the aisle shook his head slowly. A woman pressed her lips together in disbelief. The head purser cleared her throat. "Let me verify something." She stepped away briefly, leaving Stephen seated, leaving the attendant standing with quiet confidence. The smirk remained. Stephen did not speak. He did not follow her with his eyes. He remained calm, hands resting loosely, posture relaxed. But the weight of the moment pressed down on the entire cabin. Passengers began to realize this was not about rules. It was about judgment. Someone whispered, "That is unfair." Another murmured, "He paid like everyone else." Still no one intervened directly. The attendant remained firm, almost daring a response. Minutes passed slowly. When the head purser returned, she stood in front of Stephen again. Her expression had changed. Concern now replaced professionalism. "Sir, everything appears to be in order." She paused. Yet she did not offer a meal. She did not apologize. The delay only deepened the tension. Stephen finally looked up, not at the attendant, but at the people watching. Then he spoke quietly. "It is not about food." The words were soft but carried through the cabin. "It is about respect." Silence followed. The attendant shifted uncomfortably. Her confidence flickered for the first time. The head purser stood frozen, realizing the situation had escalated beyond control. Every passenger felt it. Something bigger was coming. This moment was no longer about airline service. It was about dignity. and the way Stephen remained composed only amplified the pressure. The tension grew with every passing second, every breath, every stare. All eyes stayed on Steven Seagal, waiting, because whatever happened next would decide whether this flight remained ordinary or became unforgettable. Minutes passed, but the tension did not fade. The air in the first-class cabin felt heavy. No one spoke. No one moved. Then the cockpit door opened. The captain stepped out. His presence alone changed the energy of the cabin. Passengers straightened in their seats. Conversations stopped completely. He looked around briefly. Then his eyes locked onto one person, Steven Seagal. Without hesitation, the captain walked straight down the aisle, past stunned passengers, past half-eaten meals, past the silent crew. He stopped beside Steven's seat and stood tall. "Mr. Seagal, it is an honor to have you on board, sir." The words echoed. The cabin froze. Forks hovered in mid-air. Eyes widened. Breaths were held. Stephen opened his eyes and looked up calmly. He gave a small, respectful nod. The captain smiled. A genuine smile filled with recognition. Behind him, the head purser went pale. The attendant stiffened. The captain turned toward the crew. "He is a special guest of the airline." The meaning landed instantly. Whispers broke out. Soft gasps filled the air. "That is Steven Seagal. I knew I recognized him. Wait, that is really him." The attendant's confidence vanished. Her smirk disappeared. Her face drained of color. She looked at Stephen again, this time with fear. The head purser lowered her gaze, realizing the seriousness of what had happened. The captain continued. "Everything he needs should have been handled with the highest respect." The silence grew deeper. Stephen remained seated, composed, unchanged. He did not look around. He did not react to the sudden attention. The power of the moment was not in his words. It was in his restraint. Passengers exchanged looks of shock and regret. Some felt embarrassed. Others felt relieved the truth had surfaced. The captain turned back to Stephen. "I sincerely apologize on behalf of the airline, sir." Stephen nodded once. "I appreciate that." No anger. No triumph. Just quiet dignity. The captain addressed the crew again. "This will be handled immediately." The attendant swallowed hard. Her hands trembled. For the first time she realized. This was not just a passenger. This was someone she had publicly disrespected. The cabin remained silent. Everyone understood this was a turning point. The reveal had changed everything. What was once judgment had turned into recognition. What was once humiliation had become accountability. And now the question shifted from who he was to what should happen next. Backhand index pointing right. Should the attendant be fired or forgiven? Backhand index pointing right. Comment fire or forgive. The attendant stood frozen for a moment. Her face pale. Her confidence completely gone. The reality of the situation finally sank in. She looked at Stephen again. But this time her eyes were filled with fear and regret. Not judgment. Not superiority. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I am so sorry, sir." She repeated the apology again and again, each time quieter than the last. Her words rushed, as if trying to undo what had already happened. Passengers watched closely. Some leaned forward. Others held their breath. Steven Seagal slowly stood up from his seat. The movement alone commanded silence. He did not rush. He did not show anger. His posture remained calm and balanced. When he spoke, his voice was steady, clear, controlled. "I did not ask for special treatment." The words landed firmly. "I asked for basic respect." The sentence echoed through the cabin. Not loud, but powerful. No one spoke. No one moved. The attendant lowered her head. Her shoulders slumped. The weight of her actions finally visible. The captain stepped forward immediately. "Sir, this will be documented formally." He turned to the head purser. "File a full report." The head purser nodded without hesitation. The captain then addressed the attendant. "You are relieved from service for the remainder of this flight." Her breath caught. She nodded silently. Without argument. Without protest. She turned and walked away down the aisle. Every step heavy. Every eye following. The cabin remained quiet as she disappeared behind the curtain. The resolution was not dramatic. There were no raised voices. No confrontation. Just accountability. The captain turned back to Stephen. "Once again, sir, I apologize." Stephen nodded politely. "I accept your apology." That was all. No demand. No lecture. No anger. Passengers slowly exhaled. The tension that had gripped the cabin finally released. Some looked at Stephen with admiration. Others with reflection. The meal service resumed shortly after. This time with care. With attention. A tray was placed gently in front of Stephen. Handled with respect. But the moment had already passed. This was no longer about food. It was about dignity. About how quickly assumptions can lead to humiliation. And how calm strength can change an entire situation. Stephen sat back down. Adjusted his seat. And continued his flight as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But everyone else knew. They had witnessed something rare. A moment where power was shown. Not through anger. But through restraint. Not through status. But through character. The resolution had been delivered. And the lesson had been learned. Respect is not optional. It is essential. And once it is denied, the consequences are unavoidable. As the flight continued and the cabin slowly returned to normal. One truth lingered in the air long after the tension faded. Respect is not about status or appearance. It is about how you treat people when you think they are ordinary. No title was visible. No wealth was announced. No power was displayed. Yet the way Steven Seagal carried himself revealed something deeper. True character does not need recognition. It reveals itself in moments of pressure. In that cabin, everyone saw how quickly judgment can replace courtesy. How easily assumptions can override fairness. And how silence can speak louder than confrontation. True class needs no announcement. It does not demand attention. It does not seek validation. It shows itself through patience. Through restraint. Through dignity. True power stays calm. It does not react impulsively. It does not need to dominate. It waits. The situation on that flight could have turned loud and chaotic. It could have ended in arguments, raised voices, public humiliation. But it did not. Because real strength does not rush to prove itself. It allows truth to surface on its own. Every passenger learned a lesson that day. Not from a speech. Not from authority. But from behavior. Some realized how quickly they judge others by clothing or appearance. Some understood how silence can carry authority. Some recognized that kindness is a choice made in small moments. The attendant made a mistake. But the bigger lesson belonged to everyone watching. Respect should never be selective. It should never depend on who someone is, or what they seem to have. It should be automatic, consistent, human, because the person you overlook today may be the one who defines tomorrow. And even if they are not, they still deserve dignity. That is what true class looks like. The flight landed safely. Passengers stood and collected their bags. But the moment stayed with them. Stories would be shared. Reflections would linger. Not because of fame, but because of humility. And that is why this story matters. Backhand index pointing right. Type respect if you believe kindness is real strength. Backhand index pointing right. Share where you are watching from.